All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be discussing a great case study where a small anomaly detected in network traffic triggered a technical butterfly effect. As we go through, we'll discuss the identification and handling of the malware we found, the resulting improvements in organizational response procedures at Marin, and the creation of an entirely new product called ADR. We hope you learn as much from this discussion as our teams have while addressing the challenges over the last 2 years. Joining me today are several team members. First, we have Scott Christensen. Scott's a security and system engineer at MarinHealth Medical Center. Next, we have Nader Zamanzadeh, a senior network engineer at Marin General Health. We have Daniel Brody, who's the CTO and co-founder of Cynerio. And I'm Chad Holmes. I'm a security evangelist who gets to work with all these smart guys and promote the good work they're doing on a daily basis. Before we jump right into things, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of both of our organizations. So first, about MarinHealth. They're located in Green Bay, California, in the North Bay, so just north of San Francisco. They were founded in 1952 as Marin General and have grown to 327 beds since then, and they're part of the bigger Marin Healthcare District. Cynerio was founded in 2017. And we had a pretty simply stated goal. We want to secure every IoT, OT, and medical device in healthcare environments. And while that's incredibly easy to say, it's an incredibly challenging task. 2020 was a really big year for us. We were named both a Gartner Cool Vendor and a Forrester Wave Leader. And then just recently, we received a class score of 94.8 out of 100. So many thanks to all of our customers that participated in those surveys and gave us such great reviews. Today, we're going to talk about a bunch of different topics. So I want to go over them really quick. First, I'm going to have the Marin team go over what their organization is and what they do and what their original goals of working with Cynerio were. We're then going to jump to the malware that was identified and talk a little bit about the response to that malware. We'll then shift into the resulting innovation that came from how our teams work together to handle it. We'll then discuss the broader efforts and the teamwork and process improvements that resulted, and then the future plans for both the Marin team, because they are at the forefront of adopting these new technologies, as well as Cynerio for the technologies that we're creating. As we go through, please ask questions. I'll handle as many questions in the moment as I can. So if someone's making a great point and you want to ask a question, ask it. We'll try to answer it as soon as possible. If we don't get to it in the moment, we'll make sure to address it at the end of the presentation. So starting off, let's start with Scott. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about Marin's Health initial goals and how you came to work with Cynerio?
Yeah, okay. So we're a medium-sized hospital, and we were in the process several years ago to onboard a new hospital. Basically, it was going to be an entirely new building, and it was going to replace the current hospital. And in that, we wanted to we had kind of a traditional network, and we wanted to going into the new hospital, take the opportunity to get better visibility into our network. And actually, with Cynerio, when we first looked at it, it was brought on by our former CISO, and we at that point we just wanted to look at the biomed traffic and IoT traffic, because we had like zero visibility into it at that point. And Cynerio offered that, in spades. And then we realized that just given the design of Cynerio, we realized that we could actually use that technology to get visibility into basically all of our traffic. So we just things just sort of progressed. We were kind of demoing the product initially, and the Cynerio customer success team was very supportive in our efforts because we had some financial constraints going in. We didn't really know the scale that we would be, we could actually leverage Cynerio. And they just kind of stayed with us and kind of helped us along on board the product. And it just sort of blossomed from there. So I would say it started off as, just visibility into biomed, IoT, and then it just became this broader initiative where we could really leverage it to help, to see like all of our traffic and to understand it and facilitate segmentation and security remediation.
Great. And you hit on a couple points there. We'll talk about CSM as we go along. We'll talk about segmentation. Daniel, I want to ask you one question, because the visibility aspect of what we do is incredibly important, but the security aspect is equally as important, if not more so. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges that we see the whole industry facing in not only seeing the traffic, but also then securing the devices to protect them?
Yeah. So thank you, Chad. So I think it's a great question, and I think Marin are a kind of we're before a little bit than most of the rest of the market, in the sense of they did a process a bit ago that we're seeing a lot of the rest of the community and rest of the healthcare organizations doing over the past year, where they've done significant visibility projects to get a better understanding of what IoT devices or healthcare IoT devices they have in their network, being able to get a handle on the management side of things, getting a little bit of visibility into the risk to kind of understand where they are, but then actually seeing that the projects can't end with that, right? You do that project, and then at the end of the day, you can still have a ransomware attack. You're still going to be affected. Doing only the visibility side of things is not a goal in and of itself. And that's what we're seeing, a big shift happening in the market, where organizations are starting out to do risk reduction projects using mainly segmentation, as Scott mentioned, as that is the main tool that organizations use to do that risk reduction project, and are not and are realizing that just doing only those self-contained visibility projects really are not enough and aren't helping them with the attacks that are going through the healthcare organizations.
Cool. Thank you, Daniel. And again, you hit on a couple of points we'll go through around segmentation and security as we go through. So anyone having questions about those, do feel free to ask them. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the early days of our actual engagement, because while visibility and then security were the main goals, we actually had a really early detour around some malware that was detected. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about what your team found, or what our teams found together, excuse me, and then what your team and our team did together to handle that malware?
Yeah, so I'd say so after Cynerio had been we fully onboarded, and this was I think before we brought the new hospital on, and there was we could see malicious activity coming from a legacy system. It was in a biomed device. And we saw the same. We could correlate that event with our web filtering solution, Cisco Umbrella. We actually saw command and control events in Umbrella, and then we did it, and also was getting reported in Cynerio. And Cynerio gives a lot. It's something like Umbrella is just going to let you know that there's this single IP that's exhibiting this behavior. But with Cynerio, we were able to see the whole network activity coming in and out of that device, and the threats. And so at that point we knew exactly which system what was the problem, and what wasn't potentially infected. Yet at the same time, we weren't able to, and so this is where we kind of went down the road of traditional remediation, and reached out to the system owner, who reached out to the vendor to try to get this. It was attached to a costly medical device, and we weren't able to remediate it at that time, and just kind of realized that we can't affect production and patient care by just taking it off the network. So at that point we realized that Cynerio was going to be our tool to tell us what that traffic was, so we could see what was malicious, what was unnecessary, and what was critical for function, and then basically build an ACL from that. Using micro segmentation was basically our mitigation response. It was really all we had, and And since we had that full visibility, we were able to achieve that. So that was huge. And you hear a lot about that. It's like, well, and actually, I think that was a selling point of Cynerio early on was, some things, we can identify the vulnerabilities, but, in reality, you can't actually remediate them because they're end of life, or they're just too critical. There's not redundancy. So really your only recourse is that segmentation, which is what Cynerio, does so well.
Cool, and thank you for saying we do it well. We like to think so as well. But you hit on a lot of great points. You have incredibly expensive systems that you can't take offline. They're providing care. They're both helping people and helping the hospital. And sometimes vendors don't have patches available. You really have to make sure you're protecting those systems while keeping them online. So Daniel, I'm going to shift over to you a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about the bits and the bytes? So first, how did we help identify the malicious activity that was going on, and what has that grown into, and how do we help both Marin and others currently with ADR?
So, so we have a number of technologies that allow us to alert on suspicious behavior or suspicious events happening in an organization. Everything from threat intelligence to signatures that were being used that are curated or modified to be more appropriate for the healthcare environment and the healthcare IT specifically, and also around anomalous behavior. So in this specific situation, actually, we had events coming in from both sides. This behavior was this was a known malware that was some of the signatures we had in place were alerting on. This is similar to the IT alerting that Scott mentioned. Additionally, this legacy system was not behaving in a way on the network that was indicative of the way this type of device usually behaves. And we were getting anomalous behavior and anomalous readings on the network based on that behavior. And that was part of the trigger of understanding that we need to be able to look at this thing and at a kind of a higher level and combining different alerts and different events into a higher level incident when we want to give it something as usable to our customers.
Cool, thank you, Daniel. And Scott, we just had a question come in, and I'm going to go back to you on the back of what Daniel was just mentioning. A lot of times, and I'm paraphrasing some of this, a lot of times the alerts that are coming in are they're plentiful. There's too many of them. You can't wade through all of them. So did Cynerio actually help you detect the real issues and eliminate all that noise, or did you just kind of happen to see this was the alert coming through and get lucky in seeing that? So can you talk a little bit about that and how it worked with Umbrella and the differences there?
At the stage in which we had Cynerio deployed, we were just in the portal and saw the event, and also the customer success team did let us know that this was happening. Yeah, and then at that point we were able to correlate it with other technologies.
Cool, thank you. And we all love our customer success team. They fill a lot of gaps that hospitals have. So we'll talk about that as we go on. Daniel, I do want to go back to one more question we have. When did you start thinking this wasn't just an incident response exercise and this was something that you might actually want to build into a full product?
Yeah, so I think that the interesting thing that happened for us in terms of this event was when we were talking with Marin around how they handled the event and around how the response from their side was, the challenges they were facing with remediating that risk, with removing the malware challenges, all the stuff that Scott were mentioning. And I think the pin dropped for us that, hey, this is a pretty mundane event, right? It's a very, very difficult day for Marin, but this is a pretty standard day for pretty much every health organization going through a very standard type of attack. And this isn't something unique. We're not dealing here with some state actor or some incredibly sophisticated malware. This is indicative of the day-to-day operations in a general hospital with general types of malware attacks. And the challenges that we saw were really eye-opening for us to say, well, we can do better to help this organization, and we can help them with our product and with our technology to provide them with better tools to handle the challenges that they need to handle, right? Everything from helping them with a better detection story, right? Instead of just giving a bunch of alerts or a bunch of events and needing to manually correlate that with the umbrella or other types of integrations and stuff like that, being able to give them a high-level incident that they can manage around how to handle this event, what it actually means, right? Not getting 800 events, but getting one solid incident that talks about what happened end to end. Stuff around very fast containment, right? One of the big challenges is lowering the amount of time it takes an organization to respond and to stop the malware spreading across the organization. We saw that very quickly in Marin, that they put a lot of time and effort to make sure that they could respond as quickly as possible. Organizations that don't succeed in doing that tend to have these malware spreading across the organization. And you can see that in Marin that only had that one device infected in that incident. Many other organizations, sadly, have this spread out across a lot of their radiology devices, a lot of their rest of their network, and it is becomes a much bigger challenge to handle, right? So lowering that time to response is very, very critical. So giving proper containment tools is very important. Also, investigative tools, right? One of the things that organizations really need once they need to respond to an attack is being able to investigate that attack, see, has PHI been exfiltrated, what other devices on the network are or aren't affected, how did that attack look like, and how did that attack chain look like? Again, tools which exist in the IT world but aren't really well suited for the healthcare IoT or medical device world. And I think one of the biggest things that Scott mentioned here is the response with the challenges that you have with vendors of what to do when a device is infected. You end up not being able to do much more except for segmentation and micro-segmenting that device and continuing to use it until the hospital can allocate the funds needed to replace that device or figure out how to deal with it from a service perspective with that vendor is critical, because a lot of these devices cannot be taken offline, again, as Scott mentioned. And so being able to give a one-click solution to be able to micro-segment that device and continue using it even though it's infected is critical.
Cool, thank you, Daniel. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we went from this incident to actual product on the next slide, but we did have one more question come in. What was the amount of time it took to detect and actually know what the remediation was? Was this something that happened over a matter of months? Did it happen a matter of seconds? What was the actual time frame in the moment?
Well, I mean, as soon as it was detected, we were able to, we understood it pretty quickly. Yeah, and the malware seemed to be like activated by something. It just sort of it was the device had been on the network and in Cynerio and was quiet, and then the malicious activity began. So yeah, but once it was detected, we kind of had the full picture within Cynerio.
Cool. So you're oh, sorry, I talked over you. You're talking minutes and hours, not days and weeks and months at that point then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go on to the next slide here. And Daniel, I'm going to go back to you. So we've talked kind of about why your team has decided to build this out. Can you talk a little bit more about what that builds out? Why build out the product why build the product rather than an incident response team? You fit on that a little bit, and what that process looks like and kind of where we are now.
Yeah, so I'd love to first give a big shout out to our cyber analyst team and to our customer success team that do a lot of very important work with our customers to help them through their with handling their incidents. But they also really help us as an organization to learn, right? When we do these incident handling and help organizations with these incidents, and we take that knowledge of what we go through with that customer or the information that the customer is willing to share with us, and Marin has been very helpful and open with that information, and it really helped us understand better how these organizations operate. So again, working with these organizations really kind of teaches us and helps us to better understand. That's one of the challenges, right, with providing cybersecurity for healthcare organizations is we don't have an MRI at home in our offices, sadly. So a lot of learning needs to be done with our customers. And what happened here was, again, as I said, we saw Marin using our product to work through that incident response process and to implementing those processes needed to allow them to protect their network from that incident. And we saw the work that they were doing, and we said, well, we can make this into a proper product. We can give them the actual tools and not needing them to work around our product. The work that our customer success and cyber analyst team were doing to help them through that incident, we can take that and productize that. And in that way, being able to give more value to more customers, right? At the end of the day, we don't want to have a huge team of cyber analysts that all they're doing every day is researching malware. We'd rather have a proper product that helps organizations respond very, very quickly. Speed is a huge issue in incident response, and that's something that we understood and learned how that process needs to go to work through that work that we did there. Like any startup, we believe in a lot of iterative development, and as I mentioned, healthcare, cybersecurity is critical for that. We get a lot of our knowledge from our customers, and so releasing an initial product out, continuing to work with our customers, seeing our technology, getting feedback on our alerts, seeing if the customers see value in the alerts we're giving, see value in the incidents we're giving, and based on that, allowing us to work forward with our machine learning. One of the big values we have by being healthcare focused is that healthcare networks around healthcare IoT and especially medical devices tends to be very repetitive, right? So that allows us to work on our technology from the ground up to build it in a way where we can take knowledge that the system learns from one organization and copy and paste it across how we see other organizations. So when we know how a radiology network needs to look like in 10 hospitals, at the 11th hospital, we can already be pretty confident that we know what should or shouldn't happen. If there's for example, GE MRI, and we know how a GE MRI behaves, and we see a device that's a GE MRI behaving not like the way that we know GE MRI behaves, for example, contacting an IV pump, well, in that situation, we will know that that's an anomaly. We don't need to learn how that network behaves, and that's critical for us to be able to have ADR as a day one solution. Basically, you can put it in your network, and you can very quickly get, almost practically immediately, get very high quality incidents. And again, through the work that we're doing with customers like Marin, we're able to make sure that these incidents are accurate and that we're not creating noise for hospitals, which is critical to make sure that we are not making them do more work than they need to, right? A lot of hospitals already get a lot of noise from the generic IT alerting systems. We want to make sure that ours actually helps organizations move forward and handle attacks. And if you create noise, then healthcare organizations tends to ignore these types of alerts as they come up. And I said we're rolling it out to more and more of our hospitals that we're deployed in, and continuing to roll it out to new customers as they come up.
Cool. One of the great things about having a hyper focus on any customer group, specifically healthcare, is it's a bunch of really smart people, and they have problems, and they're going to tell you exactly the problems they need to solve. And when they all have the same problems, it helps you kind of guide where the product's going to go. You started to hit on this a little bit towards the end of what you were saying, but what's the state of the product in now, right? Originally with the Marin team, it was, hey, we were building out a product to help with their specific goals. What state is it in now, and how can people try it?
Yeah, so we've been working with Marin with Marin and other customers for the past half year in terms of getting feedback, working. Our development team put a tremendous amount of effort, and we had a beta version out in the last quarter, and then now we released it for general availability. And we're already seeing the value that it gives, giving Marin and other hospitals with newer incidents that have come up and are continuing to come up in organizations as sadly they continue to happen. And we see a lot of value that hospitals can get from the solution.
Cool, thanks. We have a couple of good questions. The two questions that just came in for the people in the audience, I'm going to save those towards the end because we're going to hit on a couple of those things as we go through, and then we'll address them at the end. Scott, I want to go to you real quick because I know ADR has been running behind the scenes. The real tester product, is it still helping you? So has the ADR system we have in place and our team in place helped you find anything else since this original incident?
Yeah, there has actually been recently 2 incidents where it was kind of similar to the early one, where we saw malicious activity coming from an endpoint. In this case, it was a workstation. And we were able to correlate that with our EDR, which is carbon black. And Cynerio was able to see it on with the carbon black. We're only seeing the endpoint activity with some outbound, inbound connections, but we actually saw some malicious signatures in the actual the packets that Cynerio was able to provide that. So it's actually we have EDR, and and Cynerio is providing is complementing that with NDR. So we get a much clearer picture. And so it was kind of the same. It was a kind of a rinse and repeat. We saw the malware incident. It was a laptop that we could just take off the network, and then by looking at the rest of the network, ensure that that was the only indicator of compromise.
Cool. And we love to see that these systems you've already invested so much money and time and effort in are complementing what we do so well that we can cross-reference, see what's there, and come to an incredibly quick resolution, again, in a matter of minutes and hours in those cases. So I'm going to move on to the next slide because we have some cool questions coming in that we'll save to the end. Let's talk a little bit about the broader effort. So Scott, if we go back in time, 20 or 30 minutes now, the original goal was visibility and then segmentation. So can you talk a little bit about what you were going for there into a little bit more detail, and then kind of where you are in that process now?
Yeah, so as I said, we originally were just looking at Cynerio for just biomed, vulnerability management and visibility. And then we saw a golden opportunity with the new hospital, and there would be a Greenfield, and we'd have all these new network devices, next gen everything. It was a new building, state of the art. And we saw that we could use Cynerio to just basically get that Greenfield picture. So we just made an effort to be proactive so that we had the technology in place before we went live with the new hospital. And I salute Nodder, who him and his team really worked hard to get that in place so it could be a fully actualized product.
Cool. And Nodder, you got an opportunity to do something that most technologists don't get to do. You got to build something from the ground up. You got a greenfield opportunity, which might only happen once or twice in their career. So can you talk about the design, the visibility, the traffic insight, all the considerations you were putting in place, and how you started to roll those out?
Thank you, Chad. Yes. So we had an opportunity to implement all these new medical and biomed devices into the network, and we were adding more biomed and medical devices. So we had the opportunity, and we designed the network for segmentation and VLANing them into IP subnets so we could control the traffic. And that's the opportunity we had to do that. And the value add of Cynerio was being able to look at the traffic at the packet level and see what it's talking to and where is it talking to. That's the visibility we didn't have, and that's what helped us with the ACLs and access lists. So it was because of the new hospital we were able to do this, but without Cynerio would have been difficult to tell exactly what the traffic is. It's not just looking at syslog, it's really sitting on the network and looking at the real traffic real time, and that was the value that plus the knowledge base of Cynerio, what the devices should be doing and how they should be communicating. That was the package that was really helping us to identify and come up with the ACLs that are necessary.
Yeah, and that context of what should be happening is so incredibly valuable, particularly in healthcare. So we're happy to have developed that over time. Daniel, I want to jump to you, and I want you to bring it up just a little bit. For those that are listening in, can you talk that may not know? Can you talk a little bit about what segmentation is, why it's valuable, and how it helps protect against malware, ransomware, et cetera?
Yeah. So an important part or important tool for healthcare organizations to allow them to handle these risks and handle these attacks that happen on their network is segmentation, which basically it behaves similarly to a firewall for the internal communications of the healthcare organization, right? So you would map out the communications that you would have in your organization. You would separate out your devices based on their security profile or behavioral network behavior into different VLANs, and you would create segments between those VLANs by creating policies and ACLs to block traffic between those different VLANs. This is critical in terms of being able to provide that security. An example would be for IV pumps. So there are quite a few IV pumps in the market that are still vulnerable to pretty old vulnerabilities. And basically, the healthcare organizations don't have the tools to be able to close or patch those vulnerabilities. They also can't install anything on these devices that they run embedded OSs. What you end up having to do is being able to separate them out. Either if you're doing it over the wireless, you can do it with your wireless LAN controller, or if you're doing it through your NAC, you can do it through your NAC to separate them out into its own segment of the network and block traffic to and from them from everything but the server that is in charge of the IV pumps. Thereby, if you have an attack on your network, it won't affect the behavior of your IV pumps, thereby possibly compromising even patient safety. And as these types of solutions are rolled out across more and more devices in the organization, it raises a security posture of their great organization, making them more resilient for a possible attack, and it would affect less parts of the network.
Yeah, and I know we just released a data report that I'll show at the end of this where people can get it, but over half the devices in hospitals on the network, IoT devices, I should say, have critical level vulnerabilities. 73% of the IV pumps, like you were mentioning, do as well. We have all kinds of great stats there, but there are risks all over the place here that we have to help work on. Now, you started to touch on one topic around malware and age, things like that. So I'm going to ask one of the questions that came in. For the MarinHealth specific issues that you found, and Scott, I'll start with you. Do you know if the malware that was detected, was it old? Was it something newer? Any thoughts or any knowledge about that?
Well, in the first case, that was definitely old legacy. It was it was actually probably a remnant from an infection that ripped through the hospital like almost a decade ago. The new stuff though those were pretty new malware events, and yeah, we saw them on pretty secure workstations. So it was great to be able to detect them and get that detail through Cynerio.
Cool. And Daniel, I'm going to switch to you. Is that similar to what we see in real life? Do we see more new? Do we see more old? Is it a mixture? And why would really old malware still be infecting hospitals if they've been known for 15 or 20 years in some cases?
Yeah, so we're seeing a mix. We're seeing old and new and kind of everything in between. And I think that's also part of the challenges, because if you're talking about very old malware, and really the malware that was in the initial incident was more than a decade old malware, right? Newer ADR solution that you buy off the shelf wouldn't necessarily even detect it. That's not what they do, and that's not the work that current IT solutions do in terms of detecting these types of malware attacks. If you're talking about the brand new ones, the brand new malware that are coming out, again, they tend to infect and use new vulnerabilities. At the rate patches roll out to devices, they usually tend to still be vulnerable and susceptible to attack from these new vulnerabilities, because they're the last to be patched, right, in the hospital's network, through no fault of the hospital organization. And the reason we're still seeing also these old ones is because you have a lot of legacy operating systems and legacy devices still out there, right? The shelf life of these devices is upwards of a decade, sometimes even two. They cost a lot of money. The vendors don't necessarily have the ability to release the patches or the updated to operating system that they would want to release. And that ends up having devices that are critical for the ability for the healthcare organization to provide patient care running 10, 20-year-old operating systems that don't receive patches anymore.
Cool, thank you. And again, we cover that a lot of the data report. I won't throw a lot of stats at people because it'll just drown me out. But ultimately, we have a lot of research that shows, there are these old devices out there that are introducing risks that you might have seen, back in 2002 that are still risks in your environment. I'm going to shift a little bit now because we've talked a lot about the technology, but I want to talk about teamwork. I want to talk about this because the size of hospital IT and security teams are all over the place. Some are small, some are huge, et cetera. So Scott, just leading in to this, can you talk a little bit more about the team structure, how you worked across departments, and then how you worked with our team as well?
Yeah, so we've actually the organization, the IT team has centralized somewhat recently, which is good because initially we had things were a little more decentralized, and we had the PACS team, the biomed. And they weren't necessarily teams, and they actually weren't, necessarily thinking about security, and that was sort of our job, and kind of, using tools like Cynerio, to get that job done. But in the process, we've been able to, educate people. The Cynerio is really, the portal is really designed for, system ownership and self-management. So that's kind of the goal. That's still a work in progress. Is to get all the system owners for the various teams, dialed into Cynerio, because it's not just one person being is handling security. I mean, all of these system owners need to have just security needs to be implicit in how they manage their environments. Yeah, and we did we are a small team. And it really helped that Cynerio was kind of there to kind of just guide us and be that second set of eyes, especially as we were seeing the traffic for the first time.
Cool, thanks. And Nader, can you explain exactly how small your team is? Because I think it shows how much work and how much ground you all covered, not only with a Greenfield project, but also when Scott comes to you and says, hey, we detected malware, we need to figure this out. Can you talk a little bit about what your team structure looks like, how you worked across this company called Cynerio you had never heard of before 2 years ago, and kind of the results you got since then?
Sure. There's Scott handling the security engineering right now, and there's only 2 network engineers, myself and another colleague, that we handle the network engineering work. So all that architecture work and engineering, if you will, was for the whole hospital, for the new rollout, adding Cynerio, all of that is just basically two people. One thing that was easy was working with Cynerio team. They helped us quite a bit in how to set up the appliance. They did all of that. So that part of it was really not really time consuming for us, just racking the server, connecting the network ports so they can get into there and configure it for us. So they helped quite a bit with that, and then going through the training of how to use the appliance and what to look for and where things are at. So that part was very seamless, so that was really good.
Cool, thank you. And if there's an award for 3-person teams, I'm going to find the nomination form and put you guys out there because you did an amazing job. Daniel, you see a lot of teams, you see a lot of customer teams. Can you talk about, is this the normal dynamic? Is it bigger, smaller? And then more specifically, can you talk about our TAM, CSMs, and Cynerio Live so people know how we help fill the gaps, particularly with these smaller teams?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we see some like this and some like this. There are quite a lot of teams that are as small as Marinda, and that's kind of what's been focusing us in terms of also when we develop the product and type of work that we put in terms of customer success, to work with our customers to really make sure that they don't have to deal with any of the noise or any of the time-consuming stuff. They can get as quickly as possible to the value and deliver as much value as possible to them with as little time constraints from them as needed. We are also seeing some teams that have a larger amount of people on their teams. it just depends also how much of it is outsourced, how much of it should be is inside the company. Do you have a dedicated SOC team, or do you externalize that? And it can come in many different shapes and sizes. In terms of our TAM, CSM, and Cynerio Live, so we do have customer success to make sure our customers are getting the most they can from the product and can understand how to use it, don't have any hiccups in terms of hooking us up. We have also a TAM availability to make sure that customers who might not necessarily know how to create such a project, right? There's a lot of knowledge that we bring from working from all these different customers, and customers that want to build out these projects from scratch in their organization don't necessarily have the manpower for that. Our TAM can help you build that up and work with you to implement that risk reduction across your organization. Additionally, we have our Cynerio Live team, our cyber analysts that are work together with organizations when there's an incident or when there's a new vulnerability that comes out, or sometimes even when we find a vulnerability in one of our customer sites has recently happened, that they can provide that cyber that cyber intelligence side of things, that cyber understanding that most healthcare organizations don't have, and work with them to understand the effects either of that attack or of that risk on the organization, and how the organization should respond to it, and any other type of effects that it could create across the organization.
Yeah, and I think we all know that finding any really good skilled team members is really hard right now. Healthcare has been hit particularly hard. So if you're a healthcare organization, if you have these gaps, you're not quite sure what to do, reach out to us. If we can't help you, we certainly can find a partner that can. So over the last 45 minutes or so, we've talked about what's happened in the past, how we built out this product, how we discovered these issues, all that great stuff. Let's talk a little bit about what's in the future, because one of the benefits of a small team like this building Greenfield is they get to think of things that others may not be able to address for 18 to 24 months down the road. So Scott, I'm going to start with you. What's your team focused on for 2022 at this point?
We're just, we want to just continue building out and tuning our security roadmap. We have a few more, enterprise solutions to onboard. We are actively integrating with a new EMR with our UCSF alliance. So those are kind of the bigger things, and then we're continuing to work through this, maximize the Cynerio product. We still need to define system the various teams within the product, so that we can sort of self-manage. We're just trying to just stay ahead of the game, given just the threat landscape is just, as everyone knows, I'm sure on this call, is just this ever-evolving thing that you always have to stay on top of. And it really, I dialing in our EDR and NDR, I think we're in good shape right now. We just want to just stay on top of that.
Cool, thanks, Scott. And Nader, I know you don't work directly with Scott 10 hours a day every day. So what else is your team working on that others might want to consider going forward?
We continue to work in the build of the new hospital. That continues. Ultimately, our goal is the final state to be able to use the information from Cynerio that we get for type of devices and how they communicate, and extend that through firewalling, actually, the segments. I think one question came earlier about network segmentation. Would that be a requirement for Cynerio, prerequisite or not? I would say it's not really a prerequisite for Cynerio. Cynerio is still looking at the traffic and is still telling you what's going on and what you should do. But what we had prepared ourselves and we had the opportunity to do is segment and VLAN the traffic. So types of devices of where there are, where they should be, and how we could control them. So using that information, we used ACLs to control the traffic. Going forward, we're going to implement firewalls that we can actually firewall east-west, and how the traffic goes back and forth. So those are the efforts going forward.
And I love that you have access to the questions dashboard, because I don't even have to ask you the questions coming in. So thank you for answering that ahead of time. Daniel, I'm going to shift to you a little bit. So can you talk a little bit about what we're building out? And can you also hit on Nader's point there, which is, do they have to have full segmentation in place for our technologies to actually be effective?
So most hospitals we work with put us before they actually do the segmentation, right? We're a prerequisite for that a lot of times, right? Hospitals, to be able to segment their devices, to be able to segment their network, need to be able to know how the network looks like. They need to get the visibility needed. But most critically, they could also use help in terms of generating those policies needed for those devices. And that's one of the big things that we provide in our main risk reduction platform, being able to see which risks you have on their network, being able to understand what is an appropriate tool. Sometimes, a lot of times it would be segmentation. Sometimes it would be some other tool, device level actions, for example, and being able to very quickly and easily simulate those policies through a feature we have in our solution called virtual segmentation. And that allows you to build out those policies out and test them out before you roll them out across your organization. So we work very hard with customers to make the segmentation process in their organization quicker and easier than it would have been without us. Regarding ADR, we see it as a critical tool as organizations roll out this project. It takes time, even with amazing teams like Scott and Nader's amazing team. It still takes time to build that out, roll that out, and implement a process and a plan across your organization to be able to do that risk reduction from a technological point of view, from the networking infrastructure project. And ADR is a great way to fill that gap until you have that project up on its feet in your organization. It will allow you to understand if there's an actual attack happening on your network, and allow you to respond quickly so that you don't, so you have some protection until you have that segmentation in place to protect you from ransomware attack or any other malware.
Cool. Yeah, and segmentation is the ultimate goal there. It's what we want to achieve, but there are many, many intermediary steps before then. So don't feel like you have to go all in from day one. We're going to walk you through that whole process. So now the part I like the most, because I don't have to prepare for this slide. I just get to ask you guys a question to go. What recommendations would you have for yourselves 18 to 24 months ago that you think others can learn from? So Scott, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I think we had enough. We had some good foresight in, well, Nader did and his team in designing the network so that we were able to centralize, all the traffic, and then segment it accordingly. So that I'm grateful that we had that foresight. So because that's really important going in. I mean, I think if to the extent that organizations can kind of future-proof their network so that it's scalable and it's agile, that's been really key for this entire implementation. I think just honestly, like I guess caught by surprise by the need of EDR and NDR. I think we're in good shape now, and we got through some incidents, but you definitely want to stay ahead of the game. You want to keep vetting these enterprise solutions, and also just be aware that some solutions kind of age out. And you want to, always just kind of stay on top of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just that things age out, but new attacks and new techniques come through that would threaten you as well. So you have to always be vigilant there. Nader, other than having outstanding foresight, which was already pointed out, what other recommendations would you have?
I think doing your homework and understanding and knowing what's on your network and what types of applications, what kind of devices, having some understanding of how they're supposed to work and what they do, so you can design the network accordingly. The segmentation plays into that. That decides your segmentation. And then beyond that, you need tools like Cynerio that actually look at the traffic and actually tell you what exactly is going on. And that's what we really benefited from.
Cool, thank you. And Daniel, I'm going to modify the question a little bit for you. You talk to teams all day, every day that are at the very beginning of this journey. What do you recommend to them in terms of adoptions and things they have to think about?
So I think hospitals need to think about where they want to be in a year or two from now, right? I think part of the change that we saw where healthcare organizations were realizing just having a visibility project is not enough and is not helpful. They need to think about not where they want to be now, but where they want to be in a year or two from now and start planning out accordingly. So again, a good example would be, what other security projects do you see yourself having in a year or two around medical devices? How would you see yourself reaching those goals? And by planning now and implementing solutions in place that will help you reach that, you'll be able to be ahead of the curve and being able to be less reactive and more proactive in terms of the cybersecurity needs for those for that healthcare IoT vertical.
Cool. Thank you, Daniel. And we do have a couple questions coming in, so this is a great time to throw them in there. I do want to make the audience aware of a few other resources we've made available for them. First is we recently released a data report that took all the analysis we've ever done, analyzed it, and provided a lot of insights and guidance around that. So if you want to download that data report, it's available on the top left there. Just scan that QR code. You can also go to Cynerio.com and it'll pop right up. Additionally, Daniel and myself, as well as another Daniel Brody, did a Bright Talk webinar last week on that data report. So if you're a more visual learner than someone that likes to learn by reading, go to that. It's also on our YouTube channel, and you can see it here, a nice hour-long breakdown of what we found, our highest level findings, etc. If you do want to see more of our webinars and videos, we also have short, kind of 5 to 10 minute rapid recaps of things happening in healthcare cybersecurity space. We have a full YouTube channel of those. So go ahead to that YouTube channel. It's just Cynerio on youtube.com. And then if you are going to either Vive or HIMSS in March, the two big industry events. So Vive is March 6th through 9th. HIMSS is March 14th through 18th. We would love to see you there and dive deeper into any of these topics. We also have some really cool giveaways. So if you want to swing by the booth and register for those, we would love to talk to you. Now, I have a couple more questions that have come through. The first one, I'll leave that last slide up. The first one I'm going to direct to Scott and Nader. You've mentioned a couple different products throughout here. Umbrella was one of them, for example. How much integration was there with Cynerio, and how difficult was it to cross-reference the findings to take quick action?
Yeah, there isn't integration directly with Umbrella or Carbon Black. We did that correlation manually. But there is, I can let Cynerio Daniel speak to this too. But I mean, there are integrations that actually we were initially going down the road of Cisco ICE integration with Cynerio, and it's very closely that's where you can just actively do the segmentation based on the results of Cynerio. So yeah, there's definitely integrations there, and we actually might pursue that in the future. We were able to just do a lot of that segmentation manually with not a lot of effort, just the way that Cynerio nicely outputs the ACLs that you can just then put into your Cisco ASA. So yeah, we didn't use integration for the events that we managed.
Cool, thank you. And Daniel, I'm going to toss it over to you. You don't always need to integrate. Sometimes you can just cross-reference, but can you talk a little bit about what systems you should integrate with and what that process looks like for us?
Yeah, and I'll just mention beforehand that we didn't have an integration with Umbrella, but because of that situation, what happened with Marin, it's one of the things that we've looked at and are working towards and are in a process with Cisco at the moment to do that integration, to figure out how we can enrich and add additional information. And that's something that we continue to do with our customers as there's needs that come up, and there's more ways we can provide that integration, either through enrichment or through helping to provide policies. That's something we continue to work with through all the various different types of integration. It's something we prioritize quite a bit of. And and there's a lot of value you can get also without integrations. But again, the main integration you'd usually want is around the step one, which would be any type of enrichment integration. So that would be either with a CMMS, a firewall, a NAC, or any type of place where it would be useful to have a central repository of things that are happening on your network or in your organization. And you would like to have the additional information from Cynerio flowing to and from those solutions to have something that's closer to a single pane of glass, right? So either if you're using your NAC or your CMMS as a way to see all that's happening on your network, you can get all that information, make sure it's up to date, accurate, properly tagged and detected with that Cynerio information. There's also additional integrations, such as the ones we have in Marin, with all kinds of stuff like wireless LAN control and stuff like that, that allows to pull information from the network to make sure that our detection can show you also network information in a way that makes sense. Could be helpful to show you where devices are. And the third piece and last piece is around policy, right? So as Scott mentioned, whether it's integrating with a firewall or the NAC, being able to have that policy pushed from our solution, that's usually a last stage in kind of an integration process. Once there's full rollout, full deployment, but there is the ability to also have those policies updated automatically based on what we're seeing on the network. It can also be done manually, as is a lot of times being done to begin with, until that full rollout is being reached.
Cool, thank you. So it's ultimately about integrating at the spots where it makes the most sense, not just forcing integrations on everything. Right. All right, so last call for questions. I have one more, unless a few more come in. Scott and Nader, do you think this level of success is reasonable for a team your size? Are you guys just massive overachievers, or is it something that others can do as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we could replicate this in other organizations. Yeah, I think things just aligned really well for us. And Cynerio, their customer success team was just absolutely incredible, like in just every step of the way. So that really helped. I don't think, we couldn't have done it obviously without Cynerio's help. But yeah, it's definitely, this is something that you can replicate.
Cool, thank you. And I think Erez was your customer success manager, so I want to give a special shout out to Erez because he is an absolute rock star. So with that, we have no other questions. Guys, great job. Thank you for sharing your story. I think others are going to learn from it quite a bit. I appreciate everything you've shared with us today. Everyone in the audience, really appreciate you joining us. If you do have follow-up questions, let us know. We'll be happy to answer them. And with that, I wish you all a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.